Okay, torn from the headlines example. I found an article, which is part of what you're supposed to do, find a piece of media. Could be an article, could be a movie, could be a blog post, could be any form of media that you find, and you're going to relate it to class content. I found an article in the New York Times. I also asked you as a part of the things that I want you to do for this assignment to tell us a little bit about that media. Now, you probably know about the New York Times, but I have a few little facts here for you, just as an example of things that you might use in case people weren't familiar with your media source. So, the New York Times is an American daily newspaper. It's been producing a daily paper since 1851, and it's won 112 Pulitzer Prizes. The website is the most popular of all news websites right now on the internet, and they have greater than 30 million unique visitors every day. So this article was found specifically in the environmental section. I could not find statistics on how many people read the section on the environment. I feel like that could be a little different, but maybe all users are reading all of it. I don't know. I couldn't find numbers on that. But this article did appear in the New York Times. I will also provide you a copy of it. You can provide a copy of your information, a link to your information, some way that the rest of the people in the class could also go find that information if they wanted to find that information and do a follow-up. Because I'll give you some of the highlights and you'll give some highlights, but you know, we all want to be credible and check our facts and our information too. So a little bit about what's contained in this article. This article, as you may suspect with my Coca-Cola bottle here, related to Coca-Cola, specifically Coca-Cola and climate change. The article focused on the fact that Coca-Cola had noticed that their input costs were going up because of extreme weather conditions, that they were having trouble getting inputs for their products, as well as they saw other inputs going up in cost, things like water and things like that, due to shortages in certain areas. So global droughts and floods were basically affecting Coca-Cola's bottom line. And they are willing to admit that this is a part of climate change. And so they really embrace the idea of climate change as economically disruptive force, which I thought was kind of interesting based on the things that we've talked about in class already. And some of the things, it reminded me of Dr. Rice bringing up the insurance companies being involved in some of the discussions he's been in on climate change. It also mentioned that the World Economic Forum will focus an entire day of their forum on discussing the threat of climate change. So not just something that one big company is concerned about, but the entire World Economic Forum was going to discuss what this means for economics. All right, so a little more about the article. Nike was also mentioned as a company that was concerned about the economic effects of climate change. They reported the impact climate change has on water supplies on their financial risk disclosure form to the Securities Exchange Commission. So it seems like they're actually preparing to report this as something that could be detrimental to their company. And for them, I thought that was even more interesting because I couldn't think of what their inputs were exactly that would be affected. You know, you might have some ideas there. I would assume everybody uses water as a part of their operation, maybe just heating and cooling of their own buildings and things like that. Would be a factor. The article didn't specifically mention those types of things, but that they were concerned and they were actually crediting that as something that they needed to be concerned for the future. They also had economic experts weigh in on the subject and talk about how climate change was going to affect different areas. And one expert was quoted here as saying, there will be agriculture and economic effects. It's inescapable. So it really kind of drove home the fact that this was something that was going to affect people's bottom line, was going to affect people's pocketbooks, at least these large companies. It didn't necessarily make the connection that this would end up affecting average daily consumers, but I think we can all probably see that it will. You know, they're certainly, Coca-Cola and Nike are probably not going to eat any costs that they come across that are extra. They're going to pass those on to the general public, as will most of the industries. Agriculture may be one of the ones that has trouble passing it on. But. Okay, so the next thing that I really wanted you to do was make a connection to our class. to the content that we're reading. I mentioned some of the theories. It's a little hard to do this early in the semester. Y'all's presentations won't start until a little bit later, so still a little bit more time and a little bit more content to pull from. But I mostly pulled from our chapter 1. I do think it related to symbolic action. I got a very visual image of some of these things that the article was describing. And as you read them, you might see that too. It really made the concept of extreme weather conditions visible for me. One gentleman was quoted as saying, "We're having 100-year floods every 2 years." And I felt like I could see that. Like that was symbolic and impressive, at least in my mind. Also kind of brought to picture the droughts, the extreme floods in some areas, and really just unpredictable variability of the weather. I also saw a connection to agenda setting in this article. Really provided evidence that this is an important issue to an important company. So people would be reading this and say, hey, I identify with Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is something that I see everywhere. Maybe I'm a daily drinker of it. Even if you're not, I feel like you see it all the time in pretty much every country worldwide. So people would make a connection with this and really maybe see that as being a salient message for them because they are seeing this in a top newspaper about a top product. Also make some connections to agriculture. They discuss sugar beet specifically and sugar cane being affected products as well as citrus. I didn't really realize that Coca-Cola used citrus, but they apparently use citrus in their production too. So kind of made a connection to that. So for me, I thought from an agenda setting level, it might make that connection for other people too that might say, agriculture, why does that matter necessarily? But this article did a good job of making the connection to the economics, global economics, big business, as well as what I would consider maybe more small business, although there's certainly big business involved in agriculture too. So those are some of the connections to class I saw. The next thing that I really wanted you to do in your Torn from the Headlines is to pull some discussion questions so that we could really have a conversation about your article. And in the live class, we'll have a live conversation. On the online class, they'll have a discussion question on the blog. But contributing discussion questions is important. So these are some of the things that kind of stuck out to me is, do you think this may represent a shift in climate change discussion from societal benefits to economic benefits? Yep, Mom?
Well, I mean, the end result is that the product price will go up, and that if you are a big Coca-Cola fan, or probably the same for Pepsi products, you're gonna end up paying more, and that might have an impact on you, or it might not. I mean, you might just switch to a different product at that point, or.
But I think this kind of makes the assumption that all products will have to go up. Jennifer, what do you think?
I think of it more from like the business perspective, and so I mean a lot of the climate change discussion is talking about, oh, it's good for the environment, it's, society, the people, consumers want you to be friendly to the environment. And so now that it's shifting to businesses realizing that it's going to affect their bottom line, like their costs are going up, for them it's like, oh, this is a real thing. Like we can see the effects that it's having on our business. And so I feel like that's going to cause a shift for them to really agree and say, yes, we can see the benefits or the evidence of climate change.
I'll do Scott and then you, Marcel.
I definitely see it as almost a positive if we can view it this way, that businesses are getting involved now, because I'm just thinking that opens up the road for lobbyists to start lobbying Congress for change, backed by the big business dollars.
Yeah,
that's something you're definitely going to want to do. So I kind of see that as a positive, and kind of go off of what the two of them said as well. I think having it hit home no longer allows people to say it's something happening over there. It's in the environment in which they live. For example, water issues, people kind of tend to stay distant from it until they have to water their lawn once every 4 days. And then that problem comes at home. So when food prices skyrocket in America, or they can't get a specific item for as cheap as they wanted to, it's definitely going to bring the topic into discussion.
Good point. Marissa?
Yeah, more than a shift, I think it will add up. The discussion, like, that now with sustainable, when you talk about sustainability, it's not only society and social and environmental and economics all together and how they interact. None one should be more important than other. On the other hand, I heard, at least in Costa Rica, I heard from a trustworthy source, somebody who worked for Coca-Cola in Costa Rica, that Coca-Cola had very clear that by 2021, something like that, they were going to own at least 25% of the drinking water sources in the world.
Wow.
So that was their goal.
Okay.
So obviously this might be kind of getting in the way because
Right,
and
yeah.
because communities are also getting concerned and other like farmers, so they are not gonna let any company just to come and get buy all the land that is around the water springs or anything. Like people is getting more aware of the.
Right, you seem nervous.
Audrey? I guess my discussion or my question is that in this article was it ever mentioned that they were taking steps to minimize the amount of contribution that they would have to climate change? Was that ever said?
That's a good point. I don't think I ever saw that in there.
Well, and I just mean that can we really say there's going to be a shift in climate change discussion if they're still not, they recognize it, sure, but are they going to do anything about it? Probably not. Because as you said, they're going to pass that on to the
There was some discussion of them supporting policy, but there wasn't a lot of discussion of them saying,
oh, we'll change this about ourselves.
right.
I know in Costa Rica they are doing a lot of taking a lot of measures to reduce the use of water and recycle and things like that.
And I know they've always been big proponents
Coca-Cola,
of recycling because they're clearly creating a product that creates a lot of waste, as far as cans and bottles and anything else to add, anybody?
Well, a lot of times they'll do it because, like, the company that I work for now, they're going zero waste to landfill, and they're doing it just for the fact of to be green in the public's eye. So Coca-Cola probably, in the long run, will do it to be green in the public's eye.
That's a good point. As more companies demand it, I know that Walmart has some standards now for the products that they'll purchase need to be, sustainable at a certain level, and that shifted a lot of, that's when the caps were redesigned on a lot of water bottles and Coke bottles and things like that because they had to get those numbers down in order to be able to sell to Walmart.
And it comes to public pressure too. Again, in Costa Rica, sorry, it's the only examples that I have in hand. But in Costa Rica, there was a huge campaign last year against plastic bottles. So Coca-Cola was sort of forced to remake the glass bottles, at least for certain businesses, like hotels or things like not for supermarkets, but certain places that they don't need to provide plastic, so they are now generating more.
That's interesting.
Glass and recycling because they are like, in a hotel, you have the bottle there, nobody's gonna take it, so you can recycle it.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Of course, places where there are glass bottle recycling.
Yeah,
we still don't have
we don't
options for glass bottle recycling here.
Yeah, I have found a lot of holes here. I know, just
very interesting. Okay, well, let's move on to my next discussion question. Politically, could this side of climate change be one that both political parties are willing to accept? Any thoughts about this?
I feel like economics and just talking about business can speak to most people. There's no probably about it. There's unreasonable people on probably both sides of any party or any situation. So I would say that for the most part, making smart business decisions, I would hope, is more of a universal thing. so the optimist in me says, yeah, sure.
Okay, Scott?
I see this as an opportunity for both sides of the political spectrum to frame it in a different way that'll please their constituents. So, for example, one political party seems to obviously enjoy this topic more, and they market it to a social, environmental aspect. And then the other one, they could say, we're doing this because it's good for our small businesses, it's good for our family-owned businesses, and this is going to help them in the long run. So I think it could definitely help them frame this subject in a different way that might be more appealing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Any other thoughts or discussion on this question? Fine. The idea here is just have some stuff to get people going, have a little bit of conversation, get people engaged in the topic and maybe thinking a little bit beyond the specific article. Okay, I'm going to stop that video so they don't have to watch our entire class. Exit from Zoom. This whole thing's kind of away. Zoom.
Do you want a presentation for this assignment?
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, yes. I do say I would like for you to have a visual aid.
Okay.
So your visual aid could be anything you would like it to be. It does not necessarily have to be a PowerPoint or a Prezi or something like that. So whatever your visual aid looks like is fine for me.